Okay, good evening. Welcome to this week's Parsha, Parsha's Vayikra. So 3 very interesting offerings this evening. The first is a beautiful kliyaka. The Pasuk says, if you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. The first box on the handout is the opening Pasuk, the second Pasuk, of the Sedra. Daber b'nei Yisrael, va'amartu alehem, Adam ki yakriv mikem karban lashem. So this is the beginning of the Parsha. Parsha deals with karbonos, and the wording of this introductory pasuk is a bit strange. Daber b'nei Yisrael va'amartu aleim, and say to them, Adam ki yakriv mikem karban lashem. An Adam, a human being, a man, ki yakriv mikem karban, who offers of yourself a karban lashem. Rashi says, Adam, lomanem. Why use that expression? Says Rashi, Ma Adam Horishan lehikriv min hagezel. Just like Adam Horishan didn't steal because everything was his, Sha'akol ho'yishalai, it was all his. Af atem lo yitzakrivu min hagezel. So to you, i.e., all subsequent people who bring a carbon, should not be makriv, should not offer up from anything which is stolen. Now, a few questions on this pasuk. Number one, it's a very strange source. It's a strange derivation to teach that karbonos should not come from gezel. The normal way to express that in the Torah is lochem. For example, with Arba Minim, we say v'lakachtem lochem b'yom harishan, that you can't take a lulav which is not yours, which is stolen, which is borrowed. It's got to be fully yours. So why not just say, the word lochem in this pasuk as opposed to Adam? And also, it just seems strange that it would make more sense, seemingly, to first introduce what karbonos are and then teach me a detail of karbonos, such as, it's got to be yours, you can't take it from gezel. It's a funny way of going about it. The fact that it's got to be yours and it can't be stolen is just a detail in the whole bigger picture of karbonos. Why aren't we given more of an introduction? And there is a third question which the kliyaka asks. If you look at the second box on the page, says the kliyaka, Hischil b'loshen yochid. It says, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'omar ta, which is singular. You say, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'omar ta alehem, Adam ki yakriv mikem karban lashem, v'siyem b'loshen Rabbi. I haven't got this one on the pasuk, sorry. Takrivu karbonchem. That it says in the plural, takrivu, you should offer up. Daber b'nei Yisrael v'omar ta alehem, say to them, Adam ki yakriv, in the loshen yochid, an individual who brings a carbon, takrivu karbanchem, that you, loshen Rabbim, offer up your karbonos. So why are we switching to the Yochid to the Rabbim? So 3 questions really. Number 1, a very strange source to teach me that you can't bring from Gezel. Why not Lochem? Why is it Dafka Odom? Second question is, why are we starting off the whole Parsha with a prat, with a detail of the whole story? And 3, why do we switch from the Loshen Yochid to the Loshen Rabbim? Says the Kliyaka very beautifully. V'nira lefarish. Sheratza lahazir kol makrivei karban Hashem, that the Torah wants to warn every person who brings a carbon, shelo yikashlu b'shnei devarim, that a person shouldn't slip on 2 aspects, asher bohem, regarding karbonos, that asher bohem nichshalu Kain veHevel, about which both Kain and Hevel, in the story in Bereshis, that they slipped up on. Sheho yirishonim ba'krovas carbon, because if you think about it, Kain and Hevel were the first people to bring a carbon, and they made 2 errors. And the Torah at the outset is warning not to slip up on the errors that Kain and Hevel made. What is that? Ki Kain nichshel b'mashehevi min ha'pochus v'hagorua v'huzera pishtan. Kain's problem, his error was that he brought a very inferior carbon from pishtan, from flax. It wasn't the choicest material. V'hachatoim b'nafsheisom tzrichin lahavi nefesh ha'behema. But a person who sins has got to bring a more substantial carbon, an animal carbon, tamuras nafsham, which is really in lieu of them. Because that is one of the ideas of karbonos. In last year or 2 years ago, we had Parsha Vayikra, and I think I brought the Meshech Chochmah, who brings the different opinions why we bring karbonos. One of them is that really it's a tikkun for yourself. There, for the grace of God, go I. Because really, if a person slipped up, if Midas Hadin is operative, you're out of here. The example Rabbi Hartman always gives is, imagine you've got a guest at a Shabbos table, and the guest is sitting there, and the balabas says to him, excuse me, could you pass the salt? And he says, no, can you leave me alone, I'm eating. Bit strange. A few moments later you say, excuse me, can you just pass the Coke? And he says, look, enough of this, not Coke, not salt, just leave me alone. So this guy is not going to be invited back. It's rude. Well, so too, Kaviyachal, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created you. We're in this world. You don't play by the rules, then you've lost your right to be here. So really, a person's sin, Midas Hadin, would dictate that you're out of here. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu has enabled us to do tshuva, to bring karbonos, and therefore it's Tmuras Nashim, as the Kliyaka says. V'heva, and therefore he should bring the choices of karbonos. V'hevel afal pi shehevi mibucheres seina, and true, Hevel, he brought from the choices of his flock, but he also made an error. What was his error? It wasn't self-brought, it wasn't self-motivated that he brought the carbon. It wasn't self-generated. He saw that Cain brought a carbon, albeit an inferior one, and he was jealous of him. He also brought, that's why it says in the Pasuk, Gamhu, Kamavu Elamayla, Parshas Bereshis. So both Cain and Hevel, they were the first to bring karbonos, but they did so with errors. Cain's error was that he brought an inferior carbon, and Hevel's mistake was that he did so not out of self-motivation, but as an imitation of his brother. Next paragraph. Okay, therefore, Omar, the Pasuk says, Odom ki yakriv mikem loshen yochid. It's talking dafka loshen yochid. How so? Lo melecha. Shehamakriv yeka Odom Harishon, that a person bringing a carbon should be like Odom Harishon, bekarbonoi, in his carbon, shehoyachid ba'olam. Just like Odom Harishon was the only person in town, literally, uchashem shemizeh hatzad hoyanitzam in gezel, and therefore it wasn't shayach gezel, because everything belonged to him, was given to him. Shehoyachidi v'hoyakol shelo, it was all his. Kach mizeh hatzad hoyanitzam in adova shenichshe b'hevel. So it's reminding us that when you bring a carbon, do not be like Hevel, who brought the initial karbonos, who brought we're reminding ourselves that just like Odom Harishon wasn't jealous of somebody else, he wasn't because he saw somebody else do it, he did it totally because it came from himself. And that is the antidote to Hevel's carbon. Hevel brought a carbon because he saw Cain do it. So therefore the Torah is telling us, be like Odom, that the bringing of the carbon should be self-motivated and not because somebody else did it. And not for any other reason. Do it because of your own inspiration to do it. Zehu carbon Lashem, that is a proper carbon Lashem. Kivada in kavanosa kim Lashem Hashem, that it should be Lashem Shemayim, not because my friend is doing it, I'm jealous of that one, or I'm keeping up with the Joneses, or the Cohens, or whatever it may be. Lafuke misha ina nis'er me'atzma, to exclude somebody who is not self-motivated, ina mikem ve'ina carbon Lashem. That is not really mikem, and that's not really a carbon Lashem. Okay, next paragraph. V'zeh she'amru, and very interestingly, the Gemara says in Shabbos, Shar shehikriv Odom Harishon keren achas hoyalei b'mitzchay, that the animal, the shar, the ox that Odom Harishon offered up, the Gemara described it as having keren achas. It had only one horn in its forehead. Lokach nizamen shar bal keren achas ki hoya doime el ha'odom she'al keren echad, and it says this in a few places in Chazal. Why is that? Why did Odom Harishon's offering have one horn? Loima shehayachidi ba'olam. It's alluding to the fact that Odom Harishon was alone in the world, and therefore his animal reflects that it had one horn. V'lo gazal mishum Odom, and he didn't steal from anybody. V'lo nis'are mishum Odom, and he didn't imitate anybody else. Ki imei atzma, it came from himself. Tahanu mikem al kein olo karbon l'rotz, and therefore his carbon was accepted. Nimseh shekarbon Hashem hifsiko inyan. Now, next, the last paragraph. V'achakach Omar min ha'behema. It says that you bring it min ha'behema lahoitzi zerapishtan, to exclude zerapishtan, the inferior quality carbon. Eliyase kehevel sheimim b'cheresona, that you should bring from the choicest of your flock. Or mashe'oma takrivu karbanchem, and when it says b'loshen rabim hainu michelvehen, it's an expression of the chelev, the fat, the choicest of it. Hachelek hamuvcha she'odem boicher la'atzma, that a person chooses for himself. Hanikrib karbanchem oise takriv ligvoya, that you should offer up. there's an interesting, it says, Reishis Chelev Lashem. I think Lashon the Pasuk is. The choices should be Lashem. The Baalei Musa explain that the best part of the day is the first part of the morning. That's for most people, for many people, for me at least, you're freshest. And therefore, for others, maybe not. But if you're freshest in the morning, that is the time that should be dedicated to Avodas Hashem, to learning, to whatever it may be. Give the best to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'nokat karbonchem loshen rabim, kapirish Rashi lemesh shnayim akrivim behema, to teach us that two people can offer up a carbon. So the Kli Yakar is saying something very beautiful. The Kli Yakar, in summary, is saying that the reason why, again, we started with three questions. Number one, why this strange source of Odom to teach me that it can't be from Gezel? Say lochem or something similar. Number two, why we just sort of launching in with a detail of the whole story of Karbonos of Gezel? Just tell me, introduce what Karbonos are. And then third of all, why does it switch to Lashon Yochid to Lashon Rabim? So the answer is, says the Kli Yakar, because the people who brought the first Karbonos really were Cain and Hevel. And they both made errors. Cain brought from inferior produce, and therefore his error was not to bring of the choicest of material. Hevel's error was that he brought not because it was self-motivated, because he saw that Cain brought it, and he was jealous of him, he wanted to imitate him. And therefore, the Torah is telling us, remember, there are precedents. There was Cain and Hevel who brought Karbonos. We're doing these Karbonos, you're bringing it to get a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to atone for sins. That's of course what it's all about. But the Torah, in telling us this, is saying Odom, that just be like Odom Harishon. Odom Harishon, Hakol Shaloi, everything was his, but there was no one else to look over his shoulder to say, hey, he brought one, I'm going to do it. You're not doing it out of jealousy for anybody else. So therefore it says, Dafka Odom, that when you bring a carbon, it should be self-generated. That's the limud. It should come, be like Odom Harishon, where the bringing of the carbon is really on your own volition and desire, and not because of anybody else. And on passant, derech agav, that's how it teaches about Gezel. But it's the deeper message of why you're bringing the carbon. And so too, as the Kli Yakar says, that when the second error, the error of Hevel, that he brought, but the mistake of Cain that he brought from inferior produce, so is meant to be takrivu karbonchem hainu chelvehen, from the choicest of it. So you're rectifying and you're addressing the second problem, i.e. that it should be from the choicest and not like Cain's offering, which was from inferior produce. And lastly, why is it switching from the Yochid to Rabim? He says, like Rashi says, that Shnayim be makriv behema, that you can have a partnership bringing a carbon. That's why it switches to teach that particular limud. Okay, that's a very interesting insight of the Kli Yakar. Now, the Pasuk carries on, and a few psukim later, and it describes what types of animals you bring. And there are different types. There are animal offerings, there are bird offerings, there are flower offerings. And when it describes the bird offerings, v'im min ha'oif, in Pasuk Yudalad in Parak Aleph, it says, familiar psukim, v'im min ha'oif oila karbon el Hashem, v'hikriv min ha'toirim, oy min b'nei ha'yoyna es karbonai. Now we come across these words, throughout Sefer Vayikra. Toirim and b'nei Yona. What are they? So Toirim, the article here translates as turtle doves, and B'nai Yona are young doves. Now, what's that all about? So there is a very beautiful Ramban, which we'll go through just the key points of it, but it gives you some backgrounds to concepts which are going to sort of reappear in Sefer Vayikra, but a very interesting Ramban. So let's take a look. It's the bottom box on the sheet. It says the Ramban, Bacha ha'kosov b'shnei haminin ha'ile. The Torah chooses these specific species, i.e., the Toirim, the turtle doves, and then the B'nai Yona, these young doves, because they're very common and they're very easy to catch. So, very practical reason. These birds, you find them, a dozen a dime. They're all over the place. They're very easy, and therefore it's very practical. And much the same, says the Ramban, just like Chazal says in Medrash Vayikra, when it talks about the animal offerings, it says Shur seksovim v'se'izim, which is an ox, a sheep, and a goat. Why those animals? Sheyakriv min ha'gedilim al avisoi, that Chazal, the Torah chose those species for karbonos, that a person can bring them which is animals that are raised at his trough, at his feeding trough. And you have to sharpen your axe, your sword, your bow to hunt the animals to bring them. In other words, they're around, they're available. So the Torah dafka chooses animals for convenience, which are very prevalent, which are very abundant, and therefore they'll be easy to find and to bring as karbonos. Avu. But that explains why these minim. But why dafka Torim Hagadolim mehem? But why dafka the turtle doves, which are adults, which are older, and bnei Yonah, which are younger? What's that about? Says the Ramban. We want to dafka bring turtle doves who are adults, they're older ones, because they're very chaste and they remain attached to their mates, to their partners. That is known about the turtle doves that once their partner has lost, has gone, has died, it will never attach itself to anybody else. The message is Yisrael deveikim b'Hashem Elokehem v'lo yidbaku be'el acher la'olam. The Klal Yisrael are attached to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they will never attach themselves to another god. Aval hayonim kanoi moed. But in contrast, the yonim, the doves, are very kanoim, they're very jealous, they're very argumentative, they're very vindictive, he translates here. And when they separate from their mates, they just take another one, no problem. And therefore, very geschmack. When it comes to the Yonah, they've got a different character. Their character is they're not as loyal to their mates. As soon as one goes away, they'll find another one, no problem. So we dafka choose a Yonah, which is a bnei Yonah, from the young one. We dafka choose the young of them before they have the age to mate. Why? For the dove, when it's young, establishes a love for the nest where it was raised, more so than the rest of the birds. And Chazal tell us that for all of the types of birds, if a person goes into their nest and takes a chick or an egg from there, they will abandon it and they will never nest there again. Vayikra is not so. The dove will not abandon its nest under any circumstances. And so too, Klal Yisrael will never exchange HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Torah for anything else, because the Jew will declare, O Yehudi, O Tzolov. Either I live as a Jew, or I'll be hanged, or I'll be murdered. A very powerful idea. And they don't choose chickens for karbonos because of they're considered very promiscuous. So very interesting reasons why we dafka choosing these animals to represent the loyalty that the animals choose, and either because they're just very prevalent, or more deeply because the turtle doves have a loyalty to each other, and the Yonah, which Klal Yisrael are nimshal to, they don't have that yet, but in their young stage they've yet to mate, and therefore we're not worried about them, and because they have yet to find a partner in life. And moreover, the Yonim, they don't abandon their nest, they're very loyal to their nest and to their home, which represents the loyalty we have to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to Torah. Now just finish this interesting Ramban. He says, V'harav, the Rav, whenever the Ramban says the Rav, is quoting the Rambam. The Rambam says in Mer Nevuchim, he says, the Rambam says, the reason why we offer the adult Torah, the adult turtle doves, the older ones, and the Bnei Yonah, the chicks of the doves, the young ones, because they're just tasty. They're good. The Rambam, the rationalist, is that's the simple reason. Because the adults of Yonim is not geschmack, it's not so pleasant, the flavor is not so good. Says the Rambam, I don't really like that. Ve'ein ze emes. I don't think that's the true explanation. Why? Ki katnei hayonim kimat she'ein ruin lachila mipnei ritva. On the contrary, young doves, they're rather of being of higher quality, they're practically not fit to eat. Because of the excess moist mipnei ritva, the wetness, the moisture, which is in them. But if we pay careful attention to the nature of food, he says, it could be they were chosen for their beneficial properties. Not because of their not quality as food, but the positive effect that it can have on a person who eats them. How about this? The turtle dove has the beneficial property of sharpening your brain if you eat those. They have the benefit of other benefits of what's it called? The limbs that are not functioning. They help that as well. So they help in some way. They're sort of a therapeutic quality for limbs which are not functioning. So the Ramban argues with the Rambam, we have to choose these ones not because of the quality of their tastes, like the Rambam says, but the Ramban says because they actually have benefits in terms of either it sharpens your brain, in terms of Torim, the turtle doves, or the Bnei Yonah, somehow they're therapeutic for limbs which are not functioning fully. But either way, some very interesting reasons why we dafka choose the animals we choose. Let me finish with a beautiful idea that I saw in the writings of the Shari Oira. We mentioned earlier in the Halacha Shir, the Pasuk says, Al kol karbon chotak kriv melach. And Rashi says there's something called a bris melach. And we mentioned this Rashi earlier in the previous shir. Bris krus melach misheshis mei brachus. There's a covenant from the 6 days of creation. Shehuvtuchu hamayim hatachtonim likarev b'mizbeach. That the lower waters were brought to the mizbeach b'melach v'nisuch hamayim b'chag. What does that mean? So Rashi says that there was a bris melach. There is a covenant of salt, i.e., that the lower waters are going to be used. The salt is extracted from seawater, and we're going to use that salt to offer up on the mizbeach as per the pasuk. Al kol karbon chotak kriv melach. For every offering you bring salt, and nisuch hamayim, that we're going to take the water and put it on the mizbeach. Now, that's what Rashi says. There's a beautiful piece in the Shari Oira. Take a look, the bottom box. The Shari Oira is Rav Bergman, Rav Meir Tzvi Bergman. He's still alive, he's should live and be well. He's one of the senior yeshivas of our time. He's the son-in-law of Rav Shach. And he says the following, last box. Hine, Mayim ha'elyonim zachu lekirvas elikim lechol dari malo. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he created the world, he split the waters. There's the upper waters and the lower waters. The upper waters, they had the closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the lower waters stay down in this lowly world. And the lower waters complained. It's not fair. The upper waters, they're close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We want to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why should we stay down in this lowly world? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu compensated the lower waters and said, in about 2,500 years' time, there'll be something called the Beis HaMikdash, and the Torah will be given to the Jewish people. Yizku, there'll be a Mishkan. Yizku sheyikchu mehem melach lekarbonos umayim l'nisuch hamayim. I'll compensate you that from you, the lower waters, we're going to take salt for the karbonos, and mayim will take for the nisuch hamayim. Kikiyum mitzvahs bohem hakrovas laKadosh Baruch Hu b'karban alamelech, and that will give you your closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You'll be used for mitzvahs for a positive reason. Hu tmuras al kirvas alakim lios metzah tachas kisei hakovod, and that will compensate you for what the upper waters get for being close to the kisei hakovod. You will be used for karbonos, i.e., putting salt on the karbonos, and for nisuch hamayim. Even though the upper waters, they got their rewards immediately. As soon as the Kodesh Baruch Hu split the waters, the upper waters went straight, got that proximity, that closeness to Kodesh Baruch Hu immediately. And the lower waters didn't get it straight away, because they had to wait 2,500 years until the Torah was given and all of these rules became operative. Omnam. But since they were ready, they were prepared for some future point to be used for mitzvahs, Ka'avur alpayim v'chamesh me'as shana, about 2,500 years later, gam zeh kiras elokim miyad, ki muchonim uzonim hem lekach miyad, binazois. Says Rabbi Bergman an amazing thing. The upper and the lower waters split. So the lower waters complained, hey, what about me? We also want kiras elokim. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, yeah, you'll get your kiras elokim, because we're going to give you a special mitzvah, al kol karbon chatakriv melach, plus nisuch hamayim. It was 2,500 years later. Because they were willing and prepared to be used for a mitzvah, therefore they were muzumonim lekach, they were muchonim lekach, they were ready and prepared. It's as if they've got the kiras elokim now, even though it's not actually being put into place for 2,500 years. Says the Shiur, last paragraph. Ubazen nir lahazbir, divrei hamedrash. With this concept, in other words, he says, Bina Zois, understand that. Because being prepared to do something, or heading that way, even though you're not doing it now, is already kiras elokim. Uvazen nir lahazbir divrei hamedrash. And that can explain the following medrash. Shehuva b'toisus, which Tosus brings, which we mentioned in the earlier shir. This is Tosus in Brachas, Daf Mem Dalef, Dibar Maskal Havei Melach. Miu, Bezel Shoinei. This is the Lashon of Tosus. Miu, Rabbi Menachem hoyu medaktik ma'oid lahavi melach ala shulchan kadeisa b'medrash. So we said, that the Gemara says that Ein habetzeh rashai livtzeh ad sheyoviu melach lifton. That you shouldn't really have bread until you brought the salt or some relish. That's what the Gemara in Bracha says. Tosus in the first opinion said, nowadays we don't really need it because all our bread is well baked, it's tasty, salt and the relish and other food you have with it. But Rabbi Menachem was very medaktik to bring salt on the table. So he quotes it because there's a bris melach. When the Jewish people are sitting at the table, and everyone's waiting, they've washed their hands and everyone's sitting quiet in their shtum, and you're waiting for the person to make hamoitzi. They're not doing any mitzvahs right now. Hasotan makatrik aleim, the Sotan starts accusing, or bris melach meigin, the Sotan saying, hey look, the Jewish people, they're not involved in mitzvahs. And the Sotan is accusing the Jewish people. It is the bris melach which is meigin. That's what Tosus said. Ad kan l'shoynei. What does that mean? Look what he says. Geschmack. V'nira bi'urei. It seems that the explanation is this. You're not allowed to be talking, learning, and you can't do anything between the Netilas Yadayim and Hamoitzi. You've got to just sit quietly and wait for the bread to come. V'hinei. And therefore they're sitting at the table. No Torah, no mitzvahs. They're waiting. They're about to do a mitzvah. They're about to make the bracha of hamoitzi. They're about to engage in a meal where they're going to say divrei Torah and to sing zmiris and sustain and fuel themselves as part of eating, as part of their avodas Hashem. And therefore that is like the bris melach. That just like the mayim hatachtonim nisharu lematzah lios muchonim lemelach ad hakarban kavu har b'shonim v'kuchsheniska. So just like the mayim tachtonim said, okay, we'll wait. We're happy to wait. So for 2,500 years' time, we'll perform our mitzvah, but it's as if they've got the kiras elokim right now. Well, so too, a Jewish person sitting at the table, and he hasn't yet had his challah, but he's sitting there waiting, he's not bereft of mitzvahs, because he's ready and anticipating and mezuman and muchen to embark in a meal which is going to involve divrei Torah, singing, making hamoitzi, eating l'shem shamayim. So therefore it's as if he's doing it straight away. That's the bris melach. Amazing. So really, the Shiur is saying a very important idea. When the Sultan is makatreg, when we're sitting at the beginning of each meal, the bris melach is the antidote. Why? Because just like the mayim tachtonim represent a future performance of mitzvah, and that is as if they're muchen and muzuman to do it right now, well, so too, when a Jew sits at a meal bereft of mitzvahs and the Sultan is makatreg and saying, look what's going on, he's indicting the Jewish people, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, yeah, there's a bris melach. Just wait, give them a few moments, he'll make hamoitzi, they'll make brachas, they'll eat, they'll say divrei Torah, they'll sing zmiris, they'll eat in l'shem shamayim, it's all part of a beautiful suda, and therefore it's as if there's a covenant now of that closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because when you're anticipating, when you're muchen and mazuman to do something, it's as if you're doing it straight away. That's what the bris melach is. So just to summarize the three ideas we've spoken out this evening. Number one, it was that lovely kliyokar. That why does the parsha begin? Odom kiyakriv mekem. It addresses three problems. Number one, a strange derivation. Why don't we use the alternative lochem? Second of all, why don't we introduce karbonos? Why launch into one detail and why switch from yochid to rabbim? So we said that the idea, says the kliyokar, is to immediately focus on the first people who brought karbonos, Cain and Hevel. Both of them had a deficiency in their bringing of the karbonos. One was, it wasn't the choicest, Cain brought from Pishtan, and the second point, Hevel, was he did it because he looked over his shoulder, and therefore the message is addressed straight away. You bring karbonos for kirvas elokim. Do it not because of other people, do it because of you, Odom. Just like Odom Arishan was self-motivated, there was no one else around, so too you be self-motivated and don't do it because other people are doing it. And, as the Parsha continues and says, that you do it takrivu karbonchem, from the choicest. And don't be like Cain, who brought it from the Zera Pishtan, Cain, who brought from the Zera Pishtan, but make sure you bring it from the choicest. And why the Shnaim? Because Shnaim makrivim behema. That's why it switches from the yochid to the behema, that you can bring a carbon in partnership. Torim b'nei Yonah. Why dafka the adult Torim and the b'nei Yonah? So the Ramban explains either that dafka these types of animals are very prevalent, both in the animal world and in the bird world, and also teach us the various messages we've described, i.e. the loyalty of these particular mates, the loyalty to each other, as in the case of the Torim or the b'nei Yonah, that they are less loyal, and therefore we choose the b'nei Yonah before they've found their mate in life. Or because there's the lack of loyalty over there, but they are, however, loyal to their nest, and that represents the loyalty we have to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then the final point that the Ramban mentions, that he argues with the Rambam says is because they're tasty, is a very practical reason. The Ramban says they're not. And there are different reasons. There are other health benefits, either because it sharpens the intellect or it's therapeutic for malfunctioning limbs. And then lastly, that beautiful idea of Rav Bergman, the Shari Ora of the Bris Melach, the explanation of Taisus there in Brachos. Taisus says, Rabbi Menachem says, that we have the bris melach, that it's on the table to protect us. It's megan. What does that mean? So says Rabbi Bergman, the Shari Ora, a very beautiful pshat, that just like the Mayim Tachtonim was patient and it waited 2,500 years, it's as if they have the Kirvas Elokim right now. Well, so to us, right now, we're bereft of mitzvahs, and the Sotan is Makatrig. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, just wait a few moments. They'll make Hamotzi, they'll sing Zmiris, they'll say Divrei Torah. They're involved in a positive meal, and therefore, just wait. If they're anticipating that, then it's as if they're doing it straight away, and therefore it's Megan. Okay, we'll leave it there.